D.B. Cooper, the man who hijacked a plane and vanished forever. November 24th, 1971, Portland, Oregon. Some mysteries refuse to die, not because they lack evidence, but because every answer only creates another question. More than 50 years ago, an ordinary passenger boarded a routine commercial flight, carrying nothing more than a briefcase. He never fired a weapon, never shouted, never harmed a single passenger. Yet within hours, he would hijack an American airliner, collect $200,000 in ransom, and disappear into the darkness. No body was ever found. No confirmed sighting ever followed. No one has ever been charged. To this day, the man the world remembers as D.B. Cooper remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. His name wasn't actually D.B. Cooper, it was Dan Cooper. A simple mistake made by early newspapers transformed Dan Cooper into D.B. Cooper, and the nickname spread across the country before authorities could correct it. It became the name history would never forget. To understand how one man outwitted the FBI, we have to return to Thanksgiving Eve. America was preparing for Thanksgiving. Airports bustled with travelers eager to make it home before the holiday. Among the crowds moving through Portland International Airport was a man who attracted almost no attention. He appeared to be in his 40s, just over 6 feet tall, dark hair, olive complexion, neatly dressed in a black business suit with a white shirt and thin black tie. A raincoat hung over one arm. Nothing about him suggested danger. He looked like thousands of businessmen flying across America every day. At precisely 2 o'clock that afternoon, he walked to the Northwest Orient ticket counter. He paid $20 in cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle. When asked his name, he answered calmly, Dan Cooper. No identification was required. No baggage was searched. There were no metal detectors. In 1971, commercial aviation trusted its passengers. Within minutes, Dan Cooper was walking toward Northwest Orient Flight 305, a short 30-minute journey to Seattle, a flight that would soon become legendary. Cooper chose Seat 18C, near the rear of the aircraft. Investigators would later wonder whether that choice had been deliberate. The Boeing 727 possessed a feature unlike almost every commercial aircraft of its time: a built-in rear staircase, one that could be lowered while the airplane was still in flight. Very few passengers even knew it existed. Even fewer knew how to use it. If Cooper had planned an escape, this airplane offered the perfect opportunity. Engines roar, the aircraft takes off. At 2:50 p.m., Flight 305 lifted into the cloudy Oregon sky. Everything seemed routine. Passengers unfolded newspapers. Businessmen ordered drinks. Flight attendants moved calmly through the aisle. One of them was 23-year-old Florence Schaffner. She had no idea she was about to become part of one of America's greatest mysteries. Cooper ordered a bourbon and soda. He smoked quietly, watched the clouds drift past. Witnesses later described him as polite, calm, almost friendly. Nothing about his behavior suggested panic or violence. Then, he reached into his pocket, removed a folded note, and handed it to Florence. Assuming it was another passenger trying his luck, she slipped it into her purse without reading it. Cooper leaned toward her. His voice never changed. "Miss, you'd better read that. I have a bomb." Florence unfolded the paper. Inside were simple instructions. No dramatic threats, no unnecessary words. Just a message informing her that the man beside her carried a bomb and expected complete cooperation. When she looked back at him, he quietly opened his briefcase. Only slightly, just enough. Inside, she saw what appeared to be red cylinders, connected by wires, attached to a battery. Whether it was a real bomb or an elaborate fake has never been proven. But in that moment, she had no reason to doubt him. Radio chatter begins. Cooper spoke as though he were discussing business. He demanded exactly $200,000, all in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, 2 main parachutes, 2 reserve parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting when the aircraft landed in Seattle. If his demands were met, no one would be hurt. Florence carried the message to the cockpit. Within moments, the captain alerted air traffic control. On the ground, the FBI received word that Northwest Orient Flight 305 had been hijacked. Authorities faced an impossible decision. The airplane was carrying dozens of innocent passengers. There was no way to know whether Cooper's bomb was genuine, so they chose to negotiate. While the aircraft circled above Seattle, banks gathered the ransom. Investigators photographed every bill, recording each serial number, hoping the money might someday lead them to the hijacker. The parachutes created another problem. Why 4? Investigators soon realized the brilliance of Cooper's request. If authorities believed he might force a hostage to jump with him, they couldn't risk supplying a defective parachute. By asking for 4, Cooper virtually guaranteed that every parachute would be real. It was a move suggesting careful planning, not desperation. The plane begins its descent toward Seattle. Nearly 2 hours after the hijacking began, Flight 305 finally landed. The aircraft taxied to an isolated section of the airport. Its engines continued running. Police stayed out of sight. Ground crews approached cautiously. Every movement was deliberate. Every second mattered. The ransom and the parachutes were delivered exactly as Cooper demanded. He inspected the money. Satisfied, he did something no one expected. He released every passenger. 36 people walked safely off the aircraft. Most had no idea they had just lived through one of the most extraordinary hijackings in American history. Only 4 people remained: the flight crew and flight attendant Tina Mucklow. For everyone else, the nightmare was over. For Cooper, it was only just beginning. The music becomes darker, rain intensifies. A fighter jet silhouette appears high above the clouds. With the ransom now secured, Cooper gave one final order. The plane would take off again. Destination, Mexico City. But the real journey would end somewhere over the dark forests of the Pacific Northwest. Cooper then turned to Tina. He asked her to demonstrate how the Boeing's rear staircase operated. She explained everything she knew. He listened carefully. Not like a curious passenger, but like someone confirming information he already possessed. Then he gave her one final instruction. Return to the cockpit, close the door, leave him alone. She hesitated. For hours, she had been sitting only a few feet away from the most wanted man in America. Now, she would never see him again. As she walked toward the cockpit, she glanced back one last time. Cooper stood alone, adjusting his parachute, the ransom money strapped securely to his body. Calm, focused, silent. The cockpit door closed, and history entered its final chapter. Rain lashes against the aircraft. Thunder rolls in the distance. Conditions had deteriorated. Heavy rain, powerful winds, near-freezing temperatures. Below stretched hundreds of square miles of dense forest, towering evergreens, deep rivers, steep ravines, mountain ridges disappearing into darkness. If Cooper intended to jump, he had chosen one of the most unforgiving landscapes in America. Inside the cockpit, the crew flew on in silence, unable to see what was happening behind them, only the occasional sound of movement. Then, at exactly 8:13 p.m., something happened. The aircraft suddenly lurched upward. Cockpit instruments recorded a brief but unmistakable change in pressure. The pilots exchanged a glance. They didn't need to speak. They knew. The rear staircase had just been lowered. Somewhere behind them, Dan Cooper had stepped into the freezing night. No one saw him jump. No one heard him land. No radio call followed. No emergency beacon activated. One moment, he was aboard Flight 305. The next, he was gone. Below him, nothing but wilderness, miles of towering trees, fast-moving rivers, rocky cliffs, and relentless November rain. If he survived, he would have to navigate one of the harshest environments in the Pacific Northwest. If he failed, the forest would keep its secret. Flight lands in Reno. Police lights flash. Nearly 2 hours later, Flight 305 touched down in Reno, Nevada. Law enforcement surrounded the aircraft within seconds, weapons drawn. They rushed aboard, seat by seat, row by row. The cabin was searched. There was no hijacker. The rear staircase hung open. A black clip-on tie lay abandoned on one of the seats. Nearby, several lengths of parachute cord. The ransom, gone. The parachute, gone. The man calling himself Dan Cooper, gone. Even the cigarettes he had smoked during the hijacking, evidence that might one day have yielded DNA, would later be lost before modern forensic science could examine them. One of the biggest opportunities to identify Cooper vanished forever. Investigators now faced an astonishing possibility. Somewhere beneath the aircraft's flight path, a man carrying $200,000 had just parachuted into darkness. Did he survive? Or had the freezing wilderness claimed him within minutes? By sunrise, thousands of investigators would begin searching, but what they failed to find would transform an extraordinary hijacking into one of the greatest mysteries in criminal history. For 36 passengers, the nightmare was over. They stepped onto the runway believing they had survived a hijacking. Few of them even realized how close they had come to disaster. But for the man sitting calmly inside the Boeing 727, the real operation had only just begun. Wide aerial shot of Seattle-Tacoma Airport at dusk. Police vehicles surround the aircraft from a distance. Floodlights illuminate the tarmac. As twilight settled over Seattle, Flight 305 sat alone on a remote section of the runway. Its engines continued to idle. Authorities kept their distance. No one knew whether the bomb inside Cooper's briefcase was real. No one wanted to test him. Inside the cabin, Dan Cooper remained remarkably composed. He carefully inspected the bundles of cash, nearly 10,000 $20 bills, worth $200,000, equivalent to well over $1 million today. Each bill had been photographed, every serial number recorded. If Cooper escaped, Investigators hoped the money would eventually betray him, but Cooper had already anticipated almost everything. Then there were the parachutes. 4 of them. 2 main chutes. 2 reserve chutes. It seemed like an odd request, until investigators understood the psychology behind it. Had Cooper requested only 1 parachute, authorities might have secretly sabotaged it. But by demanding 4, he created the possibility that he intended to take a hostage with him. No official would risk handing over defective equipment if an innocent life might depend on it. It was a subtle move, but a brilliant one. Whoever Cooper was, he understood how people made decisions under pressure. Inside the aircraft, Tina Mucklow stands quietly near Cooper. Only 4 people remained aboard: Captain William Scott, First Officer William Ratitzak, Flight Engineer Harold Anderson, and 22-year-old flight attendant Tina Mucklow. She would become the last person to ever see Cooper alive, or at least the last confirmed witness. Unlike Florence Schaffner earlier that afternoon, Tina spent hours alone with him. Later, she described him as calm, polite, even considerate. He never shouted, never panicked, never behaved like the violent hijackers Americans had begun to fear. At one point, he even reminded the crew to eat if they became hungry. It was a strange contradiction. A man committing one of the most serious crimes in American history, yet treating everyone around him with quiet respect. Cooper's next demand surprised everyone. He ordered the crew back into the air, their destination, Mexico City. But the way he wanted to get there puzzled experienced pilots. He instructed them to fly at just 10,000 feet, far below normal cruising altitude, at roughly 170 knots, much slower than a commercial jet usually flies. Landing gear partially extended, wing flaps lowered, cabin pressure kept low. To most people, those instructions meant nothing. To pilots, they meant everything. These were almost perfect conditions for someone planning to jump from the aircraft. Cockpit recreation. The captain speaks calmly over his shoulder. "Captain, we can't reach Mexico without stopping for fuel." For the first time that evening, Cooper adjusted his plan. Without hesitation, he agreed. The aircraft would refuel in Reno, Nevada. There was no argument, no emotion. Every decision appeared calculated, almost rehearsed. The aircraft lifts into the rainy night. Flight 305 took off once again, this time with only 5 souls aboard, unknown to Cooper. The United States military had already entered the story. Hidden in the darkness above, a fighter jet followed the Boeing. Another tracked it from below. Their mission wasn't to intercept, only to watch. No one wanted to provoke a desperate man carrying what appeared to be a bomb. Cooper organizes the money. As the aircraft disappeared into the night, Cooper quietly prepared. He secured the ransom bag to his body using parachute cord. He examined each parachute carefully. Years later, investigators would debate one curious detail of the 4 parachutes provided. Cooper didn't choose the newest one. Instead, he selected an older military-style parachute. Was it a mistake? Or did he know something investigators didn't? To this day, no one can say for certain,